More Kenyans have come out to share their ordeals in the hands of armed criminals operating with impunity. According to the police, the suspects are part of a wider criminal group that has been terrorizing bar owners and stealing from them.
On the night of January 20th, 2026, inside a quiet bar in Kitengela, a security guard was making his usual rounds. Nothing was unusual or suspicious, just another slow night. His name was Bosco Kuntimana, and within minutes, he would be fighting for his life. A van pulled up outside. No music, no headlights flashing, just silence. Then, movement. Several men stepped out, walked straight to the entrance, and forced their way in. Bosco tried to stop them. He didn't get far. A metal bar came down on his head. Once, then everything went black. When he woke up, his hands were tied up and his legs bound alongside his fellow workmen. Also, the bar had been cleared out. Nothing was random. The alcohol was gone, the cash was gone, and the attackers had already disappeared into the night. But what Bosco didn't know was that this wasn't just a robbery, because around the same time, similar attacks were happening across Rongai, Kikuyu, and other parts of Nairobi. Same method, same targets, same precision. Bars, wines and spirits shops, hit one after another. Guards beaten, victims tied, and in some cases, killed. Behind all these attacks was a coordinated network, a syndicate that knew exactly when to move, what to take, and how to disappear. And for weeks, they operated without interruption, until the pattern became impossible to ignore, and the hunt began. At the center of this wave of terror, 3 men were believed to be pulling the strings: a mastermind, a distributor, and the logistics brains behind the vehicles used for the operation. Who were they? And how did 3 notorious gangsters remain undetected for so long? Welcome. This is Dark Hour Docs. After the attack on Bosco, the guard in Kitengela, it became clear that something far more serious was unfolding. What initially appeared to be an isolated robbery soon began to connect with other incidents reported across neighboring regions. Within days, similar cases started emerging around Nairobi. The targets were almost always the same: wines and spirits outlets, bars, and late-night entertainment spots. In these targets, business often slowed down in the early hours of the morning, and security was often minimal during these hours. On January 23, 2026, just 3 days after the attack on Bosco, the gang struck again, this time in Kitengela. A bar waitress was confronted by a group of men who demanded to know the whereabouts of the security guard. Moments later, both she and the guard were overpowered, restrained, and held at the mercy of the attackers. The gang moved quickly. They knew exactly what they were looking for: alcohol, cash, anything of value. And within minutes, they were gone. But it didn't stop there. In Kikuyu, at an area known as Region, the violence escalated. During one of the robberies, a security guard was severely attacked and later died from the injuries suffered. That incident marked a turning point. This was no longer just theft. This was a coordinated campaign of violence. By mid-February, the pattern had become even more precise. On February 18, 2026, at exactly 3:48 a.m., the gang carried out another operation in Kitengela. This time, their method revealed a level of planning that went beyond ordinary criminal behavior. They arrived in a Toyota Voxy during the quietest hours of the night, when most businesses were operating with minimal staff. Before entering the premises, they went straight to the main power source and switched off the lights from the meter box. The entire area was plunged into darkness. Then they broke in. Inside, the operation was swift and methodical. Stock was cleared, cash was taken, and by the time they left, alcohol and goods worth over 431,000 shillings had been stolen. And, just like before, there were no immediate leads. As more victims came forward, investigators began to notice the similarities. The same type of targets, the same timing, the same level of coordination, forced entry, restraint of victims, and the systematic removal of goods. This was not random, it was organized and caused a lot of fear among traders. It was now evident that this gang was not improvising. They were following a system, and somewhere behind these attacks, someone was coordinating it all. By late January 2026, the fear that had once whispered through the streets of Nairobi in Kajiado and Rongai had grown fierce. It wasn't just bars being robbed anymore. It was lives being shattered, one violent strike at a time. On January 27th, along Muhuri Road in Kikuyu, 7 people would learn this lesson the hard way. A gang of 6 men, moving with a terrifying precision, stormed a liquor store. But this wasn't a simple robbery. For 8 minutes, they controlled the scene with a cold efficiency that sent a message to anyone watching: resist, and there would be consequences. One of the robbers, seemingly a customer, had knocked on the closed door of the shop. He is seen communicating on his mobile phone. He waited, uneasy yet patient. But even before being served, he signaled his fellow gang members, who struck with speed. They forced their way inside and ordered everyone to lie down. One of the gangsters held a pistol in his hand, ready to fire at anyone who defied their orders. For 8 minutes, 6 criminals took over the shop. First, they tied their victims, then embarked on stealing all valuables on site, including phones, cash, expensive alcohol, and a laptop. All this happened while one of them kept watch at the door. At one point, a customer, oblivious of the robbery underway in the store, was lured in after inquiring to purchase a drink from the robbers, mistaking them for shop owners. Once inside, the gang took her phone and directed her to lie down. Unfortunately, outside was a friend who had accompanied her to the store and was waiting outside. He became curious about her lengthy stay, and so he followed inside to check on her. The robbers pounced on him too, and he was soon among the other victims. Satisfied with the results of the operation, the gang kidnapped one of the victims, whose hands remained tied behind his back inside one of their vehicles. The group tortured him while demanding for more money, an ordeal he endured for close to 3 hours before his friends, who were left tied at the liquor store, called police from Kikuyu police station. Police started tracking his phone and rescued him in Juja, where he had been dumped. That day, the gang walked away with goods worth over 500,000 shillings, leaving behind not just bruises, but trauma. Detectives in Kikuyu then had been investigating cases of this nature, with reports that the gang had been on a rampage in Kiambu County for a while, terrorizing residents and business people. At that point, in January 2026, the case was at least the 5th of the same kind of robbery with violence reported in different areas in Nairobi over the previous 3 weeks of January. Now it was evident that every raid followed a pattern: surveillance first, then observation. The gang knew when guards would be weak, when shopkeepers would be vulnerable, and they moved like shadows. They left no fingerprints, no unnecessary clues, just a terror that was vivid and raw. However, what they didn't know was that the DCI was following closely, and every new attack only tightened the web around themselves. For months, the gang had moved through Kajiado, Kiambu, and Nairobi like ghosts. Bars emptied, streets whispered, and traders lived in constant fear. But even the most careful criminals leave traces. By February 21st, 2026, the web of violence, intimidation, and stolen goods finally led detectives straight to the people in the heart of the operation. The first to be arrested was Peter Muhia, who was the mastermind orchestrating the attacks. Peter was cornered in his hideout in Nakuru County after weeks of forensic tracking and surveillance. Peter's arrest cracked open the structure of a criminal network that had terrorized dozens of lives as he gave up other members of the operation. Hot on his trail were his accomplices, John Mugonderito and Elisha Katito. John was the notorious distributor of stolen alcoholic consignments and was arrested in Ruiru. Elisha, though, was the logistical brain behind getaway vehicles and transportation of stolen goods. He was captured in Juja, and the arrest of the three helped dismantle the gang's operational backbone. As police documented recovered alcohol, vehicles, ropes, and crude weapons, victims also stepped forward to identify the faces that had haunted their nights. Over 30 violent robberies were now linked to this single syndicate, with bars in Nairobi, wines and spirits joints in Kikuyu, and Rongai all bearing the scars of their reign. The streets slowly breathed again. The gang that had ruled through fear, brutality, and intimidation had now been unmasked, and justice, though delayed, has finally arrived.
This has been Dark Hour Docs. Thank you for watching.